Welcome to Basic Black. Some of you are joining us on our broadcast and others of you are joining us on our digital platforms. I'm Phillip Martin, Senior Investigative Reporter, GBH News Center for Investigative Reporting. Callie Crosley has the night off. Tonight, Black Theater. Black Theater is having more than a moment. On the stage, more actors and artists of color are presenting outstanding work and stories about African American life and more plays. It's a much different story from the early days of the pandemic when theater shut down. The protest movement following the murder of George Floyd convinced theater owners to adopt equity initiatives and opportunities for diverse artists of color. As we enjoy the range of our stories being told on the stages here in Boston, where is Black Theater headed? Who is coming to watch? And how will building community relationships help sustain the art form? Joining us this evening to discuss, Dawn Meredith Simmons, co-founder and co-producing artistic director, the Front Porch Arts Collective. Kirsten Greenidge, playwright and associate professor at Boston University, and artist in residence, Company One Theater. Lyndsay Allyn Cox, producing director, the Huntington Theater Company, and Olawumi Akinwumi, deputy director, programs ArtsBoston, and founder, Afro-Deja City. Welcome to you all.
Thank you for having us.
Much appreciated. Theater, it's certainly one of my loves, one of my great loves. And how is theater, Black Theater, doing in Boston? I've been attending a number of plays, KISSING, Clyde, Twilight, a number of plays over the past year. Mm-hmm. But from your perspective, how are we doing in terms of bringing in audiences? How are we doing in terms of connecting? And Kirsten, let's start with you on that question.
I think we're doing a little better than we were and have been in past years. I think we're seeing more playwrights who have been doing this work all along. So I just want to make sure
I
myself,
right.
but I'm also a teacher, so I teach young theater artists coming into the field, and so the work has been happening for many years. I think what's beautiful about this moment is that more of it is being recognized. We still have a lot farther to go, but in this moment we're hearing a lot of voices from playwrights and then directors, which then we were able to employ actors, also designers. So it is a fruitful, vibrant moment, but we always usually have more to go, and I'm looking forward to that point, but we're not there yet.
Well, what about the rest of you?
I would co-sign everything that you just said. I think that we are in a moment that is better. There are more opportunities for stories. I think things that we have all talked about. There are more opportunities for stories that are about our joy and triumph as well as our struggle. And so we're seeing a fullness of representation of who we are as people of the African diaspora. But could it be better? Could it be more? Could it be more consistent? Yes. And could it be more hospitable so that other artists who aren't just actors and directors and playwrights can continue to stay here and make a living? Absolutely. So there's always more work to do.
To make a living.
To make a living.
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Is it possible to make a living in theater in Boston?
It depends on what you consider in theater to be. As an actor, it was really hard. I took a year off from arts administration to freelance. And it's really, really hard. There's only a certain number of roles available, only a certain number of plays being produced that have actors that look like me or characters that look like me in them. So it was a little difficult, but I got work. I'm lucky for friends like Dawn who, are choosing to direct plays that tell stories that I can be a part of. But shifting into arts administration, yes, absolutely, you can make a living as an arts administrator in this city. And I've been really fortunate to land at the Huntington where I can do the type of work I've been doing sort of community-wide and really focus that work at one organization and make a living, like pay my bills, pay my rent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Lyndsay, I find it interesting that you said that you had to freelance in order to make ends meet. By freelancing, you mean freelance acting, freelance?
All of it. So I was a freelance actor, freelance director, and it's a lot. It's a lot to be gone that many nights a week. I have a 9-year-old son at home, and so it really was exciting. It was an exciting 18 months for me, but it was really, really difficult too. because of all the number of jobs you have to kind of piece together to make ends meet as a freelance artist in the city.
Wow. Olawumi, what's been your experience?
I mean, I would say right now, look at the example that you have us all here together. Knowing the journey that basically John and Lyndsay have gone through, them getting the award, I would say that'd be the big step. Just to show the matter that, you know, Black and brown artists, playwrights can actually make a sound in Boston. So with that said, I'd say it's come a long way. Showing your voice and being radical, what you stand for, is very important, especially in the arts. So,
Where are you from originally?
I'm born and raised here in Boston.
So that brings up the other question that I've been wondering about in the context of theater, Black theater in Boston. When you think about August Wilson, you think about plays set in Pittsburgh, and you realize that it's not just Pittsburgh centered, but it's that spiritual aspect of Pittsburgh. It's Pittsburgh nostalgia. It's Pittsburgh in a different era, and it's Pittsburgh Black. Where is the same type of play that is set in Boston, where you might see the trains passing on the old orange line, the elevated subway, and so on and so forth? Is there a August Wilson moment for Boston?
What immediately comes to mind is Fran de Silveira's "Can I Touch It?" So Fran is a playwright and screenwriter, and would walk by the Strand every day on their way to school, I believe, and would think, like, I am going to have a play in there, and it's going to amplify Boston as a space. And last summer, Company One produced that play in the Strand. So I think those plays do exist out there, and we're just beginning to get the tip of the iceberg about where those works are.
That's excellent. At the Strand. That's phenomenal. So this question, you mentioned that the Norton Awards. Let's talk about that for a second. Boston theater, Black theater, has been awarded with Norton Awards. Can we talk about what that means in terms of moving forward, if you will?
I mean, I think it felt good for us. It felt good for us as the Front Porch, having sort of been doing this now for 7 years, and 2-3 of those now in this new sort of pandemic reality that we're in. And so to be able to sort of rise and get that shine was really wonderful. But I mean, I think the thing that we say as the Front Porch, there were many theaters before us, right? Akiba Abaka used to run a company. She has received what I believe Norton's, the Ernie Awards, right? Like, other people have been, but it's not that consistent. And I don't know, on Monday, we were awarded with a dearth of awards. It was gorgeous.
8 out of 10.
12 awards out of 30 nominations. And that was really wonderful, and that was a moment. But I think the thing that we say for the Porch, we don't want to be the only theater company doing this. We don't want to be the only Black company doing this. We don't want to be the only theater company doing this work. We want more, so that it is not the anomaly. It is not the event. It should be the norm. And that's kind of what we're hoping to kick open. And there have been other companies, right? Company One has been doing this kind of work for forever. Some of our sort of smaller and mid-sized organizations have also been doing it, but it is how do we make it better? How do we make more of these opportunities? Don't just do it once a year. And so that's what we're trying to help facilitate.
What have the audiences been like? I've gone to several plays over the past, since the pandemic. It's I always want to say post-pandemic, but we're really not there necessarily. But I've gone to a number of plays, and they have been well attended. But from your perspective, is that the case? Because there's the whole notion of pre-pandemic attendance and then attendance now. That's a whole different story. Who'd like to, Lyndsay?
Yeah, I don't know that we've gotten back to what those pre-pandemic numbers look like across the board. I think attendance is creeping back up. I think people are feeling more comfortable coming out to the theater. And I think a lot of it has to do with the content of the show and what's happening. I was in a show recently where the ending wasn't spoken about in the reviews. You couldn't talk about the ending. So that enticed people to want to come because they were like, well, what is this? You know, what is this ending that no one can talk about in this show, right? So in that case, that show was pretty close to selling out those last few, weekends. So I think people are coming back, but I think they're really being particular about what stories they want to see. And they're being really choosy and picky. And but we are seeing the numbers creep back up. We're nowhere near where we were before the pandemic, but hopefully by this time next year, the conversation will feel different.
And what about Black people? Are they attending these plays, Black and Latino people? I've seen some, but it's been more like a sprinkling from my perspective, but I don't know about yours.
I mean, what I've observed, I would say definitely you're right. It's a sprinkle of a little bit, but folks are family who support. And we can definitely do better in community engagement and getting people together on different topics. But it's something that we just have to kind of like broaden our horizons between our people. But I agree.
And I guess also when you center it at a place like the Strand, for example, where there was, I understand, a significant number of Black people in the community, that people will come. That's that notion: if you build it, they will come. I know, awful cliche, but
but see, I don't think that that's true, right? I think that in all of our experience, for all of the organizations that we've been a part of or run, we build it, some come, not as many as we want. And I think that speaks to what you were saying about how we engage community and how we show up for other folks to really sort of build that trust. So even though there's this thing that's happening, are we reaching out to them, marketing to them in the ways that they want to see? Are we going to the places where they get their information? And I don't know that we're always doing that. And again, I think to Lyndsay's point, I don't know that we're always also, right, people are choosy with what they want to see and how they want to spend their time and their emotional investment. And so it is still a really delicate alchemy that I don't know that we've all cracked the code on yet.
Emotional
we're still working on that.
That's
I co-sign. And theater is often about the work and the craft, but also about building relationships. So I think we are in a space, in a good space, better space, but theaters are still working on building those relationships so that an audience member doesn't just come to that one show, but believes that the shows that come after, the seasons come after, will be inviting to them, speak to them, and be something that they want to spend their money on and spend two-ish hours in community with other people.
That's right. Well, let's talk about one. It's certainly one favorite that everyone has been talking about this past year. The audience favorite is called KISSING, which explores teenage romance. It's a multiple award-winning play written by Linnell Moyse and directed by our guest, Dawn Meredith Simmons. In this clip, 15-year-old Layla, is it Layla or Lala?
Lala.
Shares her frustration with her father about dating.
Any boyfriends calling?
Please, boys are stupid.
Boys are stupid. It's something you say when you're 5. You're 15. Smart. Cute. Somebody's gotta be asking you out.
Boys my age don't ask you out. They whistle and lick. Crotch grab and hey ma, can I holler at you? Hey yo, shorty, what's good?
You sound like you don't like it.
Of course I don't like it. Why can't they be polite? A simple hello. I'm so and so. Would you like to join me for some tea?
You want to date a white girl?
You don't gotta be white to say hello, Daddy.
I'm just saying. Only so-and-so's here for a spot of tea I've ever met. All right. Pardon me. Would you have any play football?
You acting a fool, but I'm serious. It's lonely having standards. All day long, I see kids make out in the cafeteria, back row of my math class, the freaking pool, and I'm talking third base. I've never been kissed, not even on the hand.
that's a great play. Right.
Yeah.
You must have enjoyed it.
Very much, very much. And I think to that question that you were asking about the August Wilson, right? Linnell wrote a play that was also a love letter to Boston, right? She grew up in Cambridge. And all of those little sort of touchstones of this city and its sort of suburbs are in there. And that, I think, gave a lot of people something to grab onto. They're like, oh, this is a slice of Black life that we don't often get to see. And just celebrating love, and I want to say more importantly, celebrating a woman, a young woman coming into her own where she's not in danger, right? Where she has two loving parents, right? There is a stressor on that relationship, but still she is navigating, but you're never worried about her other than, right, what is she gonna do with her life? Which boy is she going to choose? What is going to come of her? And it gave a lightness that I think we all needed right now, but also like grounded in the city that we love and choose to make our home.
And it had universal appeal. It's everyone could relate to it.
Yeah.
And so I asked this question, and I raised that for this reason. We're also in a moment, not just in the context of Black theater, but in terms of the way we explore things like history and culture in general, where some folks, for example, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, is pushing back against that interpretation of reality. Objective history, for example. And so you still see a backlash against some people in theater. Before the show started, I'd mentioned the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, which was run by a Black woman until this week.
Yep.
And she has received death threats because of her interpretation of Shakespeare, and so on and so forth. Talk about that. Talk about your feelings about how do you present at a time of extraordinary polarization? How do you present even Black theater and Black experience, if you will, or experiences, when so many people would like to essentially erase that experience?
Well, you know, I've only been a Black playwright, so I'm not sure how I would step into a different choice. My choice to be a playwright, many times writers have a calling to do it, but it's also often mission-based, particularly for playwrights of color or playwrights who come from a marginalized identity. So this is what I do, and my job is to highlight and foster discussion amongst audience members and amongst communities. So there is not another choice for me, and I think as a playwright of color, often in the United States right now, you are stepping into that choice to amplify stories that other people might not feel are important, but they are important to the artist. So hopefully we give the artist the time and the resources to do their work, and they're going to keep that conversation moving forward.
Olawumi?
I mean, I will just say I'm here as an advocate to support the queens and kings who are putting this work together. I might not have the experience as a playwright or a director, but as in my job as an arts administrator is support the work that they are doing and making sure that the voice is being heard, because most importantly are the stories that are being told. And I think that carries a lot of what's going on at the time, whether it's in the past or towards now.
Oh yeah, Lyndsay.
Yeah, you know, I have a reputation for not catering to the comfort of other people. So, you know, I think it's okay to be uncomfortable. I think it's okay for people to come to the theater and be challenged. I think it's okay for their perspectives to be questioned. And for me, if that's not happening, I'm really not doing the work, because for me, that's what the work is. The work is that you come in, you either see a reflection of yourself or a reflection of something that you're not familiar with, and that you leave with some, some thoughts that you're going to ponder as you, head to the bar afterwards or whatever you choose to do. So I'm interested in stories that do make people uncomfortable, that do make you, wiggle a little bit in your seat and do make you think a little more deeply. So if someone wants to do, whatever version of whatever they want to do, I'm here for it. And I may not like it, and it may make me uncomfortable.
That's true.
But then I think about that and I reflect on that.
I guess that's the whole point of theater. I mean, this is storytelling, and not every story is going to make everyone comfortable.
Right.
Yeah. I think yes to everything that everyone said. I in my head, I am also trying to dance the line of like conspiracy theory where I'm like, how many of these people who are issuing death threats even saw the work? Are they reacting to what they heard, right? There is a faction of people who, right, do not want to hold the mirror up to nature, want to forget about our very ugly and storied past. And it's not just about Black people. Like, so many harms have been done. I don't know why we wouldn't actually try to deal with that and heal. But I think that is a power move. And so by threatening someone, you get to try to maintain power. It is a shame, right, that she had to leave.
We're talking about the Oregon.
That is, I can't imagine what it is to be in that situation when we are supposed to do something that makes you think, that makes you feel, that makes you question. And I mean, I think part of the larger thing is the art form that we do it in, and especially within this city, right, there is a little bit sometimes of preaching to the choir. We are speaking to people who want this challenge, who want this work. And then when they come in and interact and engage with something that they don't like, I think we deal with it, I want to say, in very old-fashioned ways in which we are civilized and we talk things out and we're like, we agree to disagree, like violently, but like violently, vehemently through discussion, not death threats. And so that is, I think when I hear stuff like that, it makes me feel like that is somebody who is not actually really engaging with the work. They've heard the headline, and that's what they're responding to.
And of course, that portal and that the way that some are looking at this issue is not, of course, just at Black folk, but they're also looking at the door that's been opened for LGBTQ. And Black theater seems to have opened that door even wider for LGBTQ communities as an observation. Let me ask you this as we wind down. Each of you, talk about your prognosis for theater, Black theater in Boston, which of course is not just about Black experiences, but also Black actors and a myriad of experiences that might be interconnected with various communities. And let's start with you, Lyndsay, and we'll go around this way.
Oh my gosh. You know, I think the state of Black theater in Boston is improving. I've been here for 16 years. Things are very different than they were 16 years ago. There's a lot of work to be done, as we spoke about at the top. Something that I feel is missing from the community is the hiring of Black directors to simply direct plays. Not just the Black play, you know, but to just direct plays. You know, I think that is something that if I were to want to push for some improvement, you know, in a small, very like low-hanging fruit kind of way, it's, you don't just have to hire Dawn to direct the Black play. Dawn can direct plays. Regardless of their content. You know what I mean? Lyndsay can direct plays, regardless of their content. And if you have more directors of color directing a variety of plays, then they're casting in a very diverse way. And then more actors of color are getting work, right? So I think that there is a need to put people in positions of power, right, where they can make decisions, who are people of color. And I think that, you know, all of us sort of in our positions as professors and leaders of organizations are really setting the tone for that.
Well, that certainly makes sense. More Black directors. Ola?
I mean, I piggyback off of that. I think it's true. Boston is changing in a way. The wave is moving. We're putting a lot of leaders that are actually putting their foot to what they've been saying. And it's giving people a different light and perspective in their voices. And I think that's very important. It shouldn't be just on basic plays that are Black. You know, Dawn should produce something that's out of the ordinary. Or even us supporting. I mean, that's what our members do, coming from NAC. And I'm gonna leave it as that.
I think Boston, we have so many colleges and universities that I think a next step might be to make sure that it is hospitable for young theater artists to live and work here, so that there are spaces where there's funding, that the cost of housing isn't so high, that a young person who's just out of Boca or BU or Emerson can make a just choice to live here and not have to go live with their parents. Once they're at their parents, they're making theater in that town, and we would love them to stay here and make theater here. I think that is getting better, but it's an economy. So I think what's really beautiful about theater is that we think of it sometimes as just going to see a play, but you're really supporting the restaurants in that area. You're making sure that there's vibrant public transportation to get there. So the theater ecology can be really, really, really rich if we're also thinking about the economy of those spaces.
Connecting the dots. That's right. Dawn.
Well, I want to say, to your point, there was a time where I actually used to direct all types of shows. And then all of a sudden, and I mean, this is the weird sort of cyclical, right? Like, oh, we need to make space for this particular type of person. And then all of a sudden, that was all that I was getting. And I feel like, right, we were working on the scene and we would do all kinds of stuff. And then all of a sudden, like, just low key, like,
words,
do you notice the kind of work that we're being offered now?
In other words, we have a ways to go.
We have a ways to go.
Well, look, I want to thank you all. This was just like a fantastic and a necessary conversation. Folks, that's the end of our broadcast and the end of our show. Thank you for joining us. Now stay with us as we continue our conversation on our digital platforms, YouTube and Facebook. I'm Phillip Martin, Senior Investigative Reporter, GBH News Center for Investigative Reporting. We are on YouTube and Facebook with our post show, continuing our discussion on Black theater. When I think about Black theater, of course you think about classics, but you also think about all the modern theater that all of you are involved in right now. And then there's another factor that comes to mind, and that is the role that individuals who've made incredible impression on the screen, however you might think of that impression, Tyler Perry, and his impact on theater. He is not only, of course, involved with movies in Hollywood, if you will, or Atlantawood, but he's also now focused on the theater. What type of impact does that have on the broad definitions of Black theater, if you will? Anyone who would like to?
That's a hard one.
It's hard.
I think you have young people who may not have considered the theater as a viable option for them, becoming more interested and engaged. You know, people who have been going to the movies, young people go to the movies all the time, but a lot of young people don't go to the theater, right? And for someone as well-known and famous and, whatever as Tyler Perry is, I think that is attractive to young people, and now they're becoming more interested. I have family down in Atlanta, and my brother's moving back there after dental school, and I'm like, you got to see what's happening down there in that theater scene, because Tyler Perry has blown it up, and I think it sort of trickles outside of the city, and I think it's coming here to Boston, where at the Huntington, there's an education program that brings students in to see student matinees, to bring students to the theater, and it would be wonderful if we could have every public school student in Boston come to the theater at some point before they graduate, so they can experience this thing that might seem elusive to them, but that is very accessible and right in their backyards, So I think Tyler Perry, we need a spokesperson who's cooler than me, maybe, to encourage young people to get involved in the theater and in all aspects of it, not just as patrons, but as makers.
Maybe we should bring Tyler Perry to Boston.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about Ain't No More on Broadway and how that show was facing closing and having star power in terms of visibility, but also in terms of money, because theater takes money to be able to say, let's give this more life and let's publicize what's happening, that the show is closing, perhaps
How long
spiritually.
was it on?
I think
on
just a
Broadway?
few weeks, and then that attention extended it another week. But what it also does is just raises the visibility of a show that might have, withered away, and found a very welcoming home in maybe regional theater or small theaters. But in terms of that spotlight of Broadway, got a second life, and a star who's moneyed and connected can do that.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's
Wow.
real.
Yeah, we saw Samuel L. Jackson recently. I think he was in the piano lesson, right? On Broadway, and that also did not last as long as some people assumed. I don't know if it was the schedule or if it was audience.
I mean, I think it's a little of both, right? The value proposition, like what it costs to make theater, and then how much you have to sell in tickets, right? Rent, all of that, like how much you have to pay, right? It's a really strange financial model. And I think having somebody like a Sam Jackson, having what Denzel's son was in that production as well, right? You have all of this star power, but right, I think it can only sustain for so long. And I think what we saw, especially coming out of the pandemic and up until now, right, that shows that we thought were going to last forever. We're going to go on for years, right? Closing much more quickly than we thought. And I think a lot of that also is, what am I going to spend my money on? Right? What shows do I want to invest in? Can I see this at home? That's my favorite. If you're like, actually, I can see a really great version of this at home, yes, then we're doing our job.
I've been wondering about that because when you hear about someone paying $1,000 for a Beyonce ticket, you wonder, wouldn't it be great if they could pay $100 for a theater ticket?
All the time.
And is this something you think about all the time?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, the price is right, but I mean, like everything everyone said here, I mean, the budget is very important, and I think it strays along on like who's actually getting the funding to make it happen. I'm more on the back end to understand like the box office, like how long is a run, and how long would it take marketing to be, which should be the biggest part of the budget. And it takes time to communicate that, and I think location also makes a big key of where people would like to come and comfortably watch a show. Hibernian Hall has been known for that, for small companies to come in just to get experience, and building partnerships and collaborations help a lot as well.
Hibernian Hall, has Hibernian sponsored plays of late?
Actor Shakespeare Project just did an award-winning production of Seven Guitars at Hibernian Hall. And they had a set designer who came in and transformed that space. And Actor Shakespeare Project was able to do the production because they worked in cahoots with Hibernian, who gave them the space and some of the support team, technical team to help. And Maurice Parent directed the performance, the play. And it won awards. It was great.
What a good night at the Norton.
I was just about to mention the two of you the other day went to the Norton Awards. What was that like?
It was so joyful. I think that the producers of the Nortons were really taken aback by the joy that was in the room that night. I think it was such an experience for everyone to be back in the room, first of all, for everyone. And then I think there were so many young people of color in the house. They were cheering for every nominee who flashed up on the screen, which I think had never happened before. It's usually a more quiet, experience. But it was just so joyful for people to jump out of their seats and applaud when someone won. And it was so, so joyful.
And I bet that audience exuded creativity. The way people dressed, the interactions. You can imagine a theater of a room full of theater lovers. It has to be fantastic. Which also provokes me to ask this question. I'm curious about yourselves, and just wondered if briefly you could describe how you got into this world of theater. There are those of us like myself who did theater in high school and college, but I went from there to journalism, which might be a logical progression. many people feel. But I'm just wondering about yourselves, and I'm envious because, I would still love to be in that theater world, as you can tell.
Oh, well,
I mean, we're taking pictures and resumes, like, where do you want to
be with Lyndsay? John will direct.
That's right.
I know that for me, I always wrote, but it was seeing an August Wilson production at a school trip. So that infrastructure of school groups coming in and seeing a show and using that inspiration to say, hey, wait, maybe I could do this, as opposed to being the doctor that I think maybe one of my parents maybe would have been more happy with me being. But it was seeing that show as a 7th grade field trip, Joe Turner's Come and Gone, and saying, wait, a little light switching on and saying, maybe I can do this.
An August Wilson play.
It was Joe Turner's Come and Gone before its Broadway
Before
run.
its Broadway production. Ola, how did you get started?
Well, I will say I'm still learning more in the theater. I'm more of a supporter advocate in arts administrative work, but I just happen to land into it and be around my peers and just learn the back end of what it takes to put a theater together.
And the bottom line is, though, you're in theater.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
However you enter into it, you are in theater.
Definitely.
That's right.
Every day.
Well, wait a minute, because I'm an advocate for you for a second, right? Because
There you go.
you are an administrator, a supporter, absolutely, but you've also been a producer, right? You've produced things that I've done over at Hibernian Hall. And so I think it is one of those moments where, right, we talk about people who start on the small or the fringe level, right? They get a start because of folks like you. So, no, you're in it. I mean, some people are like, how did I stumble into producing? Why am I managing the budget? But it's being able to have those conversations and figure that out. So
And while you're there, and what about yourself? How did you get yourself?
ooh, it's a long journey. I started out, I thought I was going to be a dancer. My first entryway into theater was like Andrew Lloyd Webber. Don't judge, he's awesome. I don't care what anybody says. Cast was great. I thought I was going to be in it. And then when I got into college, I started taking some of these theater appreciation, script analysis. I was just I want to figure out more, and I started writing, and I actually learned that I was that's really where I shine, but I don't do it enough. So I came here for school. I went to the BU playwriting program, but within that, because I had to put myself through school, through grad school, I started doing all of this other stuff in theater and started working as I was an assistant stage manager. I ran sound. I shouldn't be running sound. I don't know anything about that. And had the opportunity to sit behind some really incredible directors and start assistant directing, and then I was like, oh, I like this one.
Props to you,
Yes.
Lyndsay.
I always was doing the Pilgrim plays in elementary school and, whatever I did. And I was also in chorus, show choir and growing up. But really, I think the thing that sealed the deal for me, and this is going to sound like such a cliche, but in the 11th grade, we went to see a touring production. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, of Rent. And it was 1998, and I saw Rent, and I saw people that looked like me on stage in this rock musical that made some people leave at intermission, and I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. I want to do shows that make people leave at intermission because they're so offended.
There you go. Look, I got to tell you, this has been fantastic. I want to thank all of you. And by the way, my start was in stagecraft, trying to build stages.
Oh, I love that.
The math didn't work. Look, thank you very much. This has really been fantastic.
Thank you.
Dawn,
Thank you.
Lyndsay, Ola, Kirsten, thank you very much.
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.